Start now that we got our security out the way, letting you all know that it's being recorded. So good morning, everyone. I'm LaShawn Gordon. I get the privilege of being the Director of Membership Engagement here at United Partners for Human Services. And thank you for joining our training today. This is volunteer engagement, and we're going to talk about characteristics of agencies who successfully do community engagement and volunteer management. And we're super excited with us today to have the team from Volunteer Leon. We have the Volunteer Services Manager, Mr. Royal King, as well as Kay Pelt Walker, who is the Volunteer Services Coordinator. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. And as always, we also have my colleague and our executive director, Amber Tynan, in the room. Hey, Amber. We will be monitoring the chat and kind of controlling the behind the scenes. So if you need anything, just privately message one of us and we'll get you taken care of. But Royal, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, LaShawn and Amber. Excited to be here with everyone this morning. It is our hope that this presentation is fun, but also informative, and looking forward to assisting you beyond this point to help your organizations run really well. Again, like LaShawn said, I'm Royal King, the Volunteer Services Manager for Leon County with our Volunteer Leon program. And to not belabor you anymore, let's get started. I invite Kay to kick us off.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. So today we want to provide you with an overview of the principles that we typically discuss during our volunteer management engagement series, which Volunteer Leon typically offers in the spring annually. And so the definition that we will be using today, okay, yeah, that slides. The definition that we will be using today is a person who performs a service willingly and without pay. Now, this definition will include our regular volunteer staff, our episodic or event volunteers, interns, and court-ordered or mandated volunteers, which are those kids who are trying to get those bright futures hours. And typically when we look at organizations, there are three reasons why they want to use volunteers. The first is reduction in operation costs. And we all know that with times being as they are, people are looking for ways to, not yet, I'll tell you. People are looking for ways to cut costs with their operations and staff. And so volunteers can assist with that. Secondly is to increase service delivery. And so with our staff being so stretched, we can add volunteers to our roster in order to help provide additional services to our clientele. And then number three is that volunteers may have a specialized skill that our staff does not have. All right. So in the chat box, if you wouldn't mind, if you would just briefly put in why your organization is using volunteers or considering using volunteers, so we can just take a look at that. If you'll just take a moment to do that for me, please. Am I muted? Oh, okay. Keep our hotlines running. Thank you, Summer. Anybody else? Right, indeed. I know you're right, John, for real. Get all the work done. All right. Yes. Right, cut program costs, indeed. Okay, well, thank you so much. Next slide, LaShawn, please. So when we look at the research surrounding those organizations who successfully engage volunteers, we find that they are successful because they lay the foundation using the mission and vision. And when the mission and vision are clearly articulated, they're used constantly, they're presented for the volunteers, they're presented for staff, they're discussed throughout the organization. Because when the mission and vision are concrete, it provides a pathway so that everyone can work towards that and have a strong foundation to follow. And in organizations that are successful, volunteers are seen as valuable human resources, which directly contribute to the mission. As we saw in some of those chats, helping with our costs, lowering operation costs and getting that work done. And so they're not an afterthought. They have to be presented as, like I said, human resources that directly affect the mission and vision. And so included in that. And most times it's on the volunteer manager or the volunteer specialist or whoever is engaging those volunteers to educate administration and staff about the value of volunteers, of using volunteers and bringing them into the organization. And a lot of times, especially nowadays too, you have to address those fears about bringing on volunteers, because even though we want to bring on volunteers to help us cut those operation costs and get that work done, we want staff to feel comfortable that their job is not in jeopardy because we're using volunteers, we're bringing volunteers on. And so we want to understand the motivational styles that can lead to effective position placement and supervision of volunteers. Because if we bring in volunteers and we have not taken the time to set out a concrete position description, then they don't know what they're supposed to do. Staff doesn't know what they're supposed to do, and it causes problems. We want to have a clear, defined position description so that when the volunteer comes on, they know exactly what is expected of them. When we build understanding and collaboration with the volunteers, it goes a long way, like we just stated, about building teamwork between paid and unpaid staff. And so we want to break down those barriers. We want to address those myths and things that, oh, this volunteer is here to take my job. I'm not going to work with this volunteer because I'm not going to, as I've heard it said before, I'm not going to train my replacement. So we want to allay those fears, and so that staff working with volunteers understands that volunteers are here to help, not hurt. And lastly, understanding that the organization is attempting to improve its operations, and volunteer motivations change, as well as we found out this past year that our operations had to change too. And so we have to constantly evaluate our programs so that we can learn, grow, and change. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, okay. Oh, not that. Go back. Sorry. Okay. So here we see the elements of volunteer management. And it's important to take note that once the volunteer program is established, these things happen simultaneously and constantly, because as I just stated, the program changes. And so you have to continuously recruit new volunteers, retrain old volunteers and staff on how to work with volunteers. And so it's an ongoing cycle. Next slide, please. So now we're going to start talking about these elements of volunteer management. And we're going to talk about planning first, because typically most people think you have to start somewhere. So when you're thinking about beginning your volunteer program, you've got to remember that volunteers are not free. Although organizations do not pay for volunteer salaries, you do have to invest time and other resources to ensure that your volunteers are effective. A volunteer program has inherent risks and they have to be addressed. There are some ways to control some risks. You can avoid the risk by not engaging in the activity. You can eliminate or minimize the risk by modifying the activity, or you can transfer financial liability through contract or insurance, such as with workers' compensation for volunteers. But because there are still several volunteer positions that have risk associated and different risk levels associated, you have to address the risk level at each life cycle of the volunteer position, at each stage of the life cycle. So just for example, let's take a look at a volunteer firefighter position. So just to qualify to apply for certification, one needs to be an adult, 18 years of age or older. You have to have a high school diploma or equivalent. You cannot have been convicted or dishonorably discharged. You have to submit for fingerprints. You have to have good moral character as determined by the procedures established by the Division of the State Fire Marshal. You have to be in good physical condition as determined by a medical examination. And you have to be a non-user of tobacco products for at least 1 year immediately preceding your application. Now, if you're just looking for warm bodies, doing the cattle call for an event, there's not necessarily need to be this strict. However, if your position has, or your volunteer position has direct client contact, especially with vulnerable populations such as children or the elderly or the mentally challenged, then you want to make sure that you have safeguards and strategies incorporated into each stage for recruiting for this volunteer. And you want to use a targeted recruitment plan. So during the position description, you want to list the qualifications. So those that do not have the qualifications won't even apply. And if they do, they can be immediately disqualified. During the interview process, you want to discuss in more depth the risks and allow the interviewer and volunteer time to process and make sure that the position is a good fit, that they will be able to comply with all of the things that are required of them. The screening process includes your background checking, fingerprinting, that type of thing. So, like I said, you want to be between your interview and the time you do your screening, your background checks, because background checks and fingerprinting typically does have a cost associated with it. So you want to give the volunteer and the interviewer, like I said, maybe a few days, a couple days to let that sink in, the discussion that you've had during the interview, to make sure that this is a good fit. Because you may find out that even though this person is qualified, when they figure out that, oh, wait, I didn't expect that I would have to spend 20 hours a week doing this, or I wasn't expecting to have to use my gas to go out, or whatever the case may be, they may decide, no, this isn't going to work for me. So you want to give them that time between the time you interview and then the time you move forward with your screening process. So once they've completed the screening process and you move on to your orienting and training, you want to give detailed instructions about the expectations of the position. You also want to discuss you want to discuss any consequences for not following procedures, because that's important. And it may even include up until criminal charges, if that's the case. So because it's the volunteer manager's job, to make sure that volunteers understand that they represent the organization in their position and they're accountable for their actions while performing their duties. And some organizations even have volunteers to sign a commitment agreement, something similar to what staff signs, as far as that they've read the volunteer manual and they understand and they are ready to proceed and work under the guidance of the organization. And definitely during supervision, the supervision stage, you want to check on your volunteers and make sure they continue to follow procedures. Because sometimes when a volunteer has been doing a position for so long, they feel like they've figured it all out and they found out all the shortcuts and things like that. But it may be a case where even though they found a shortcut, it's causing more work for someone else on the back end. And so that's when it's time to bring them, sit them down and do a retrain, and make sure they understand the importance of their piece in their position. So because volunteers are an asset, we don't want them to become a liability. Next slide, please.
And also, Kate, to add to that, for some of the organizations who are smaller, right, and you may not have a volunteer manager yet, you might be the ED, the volunteer manager, the volunteer recruiter, the staff person. Understand that these are things that we can also help you with. And Kay is going to start to talk about that now. So don't feel overwhelmed. That's a big part of why we're here, to help support you as you grow your organizations too. So I just wanted to note that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Roel. That is so true. That is Volunteer Leon's, our main goal is to assist our community organizations with connecting with volunteers, and volunteers connecting with our community organizations. And so with that, we're going to talk about recruiting. And so here listed on this slide is several of our volunteer bases that we have here in our community. And first I'm going to go through the others, then I'm going to come back and talk about our Get Connected and see if, and I should have did this earlier, I apologize, LaShawn. I don't know if that link will work to Get Connected to come up. Yeah, okay. All right, no problem. But so Get Connected is the platform that we use to connect volunteers with the opportunity. So we view it as the one-stop shop. So we have several agencies. Many of you, your agency is on there, and you have your volunteer opportunities listed, your positions that you're looking for. And so volunteers can go here. It's a free site that a free resource, that we provide to the community for nonprofit organizations to use to help assist with recruiting volunteers. And so the web address is volunteer.volunteerleon.org. And if you're interested in getting your organization on there, or you're new to your organization, and although your organization is on there, you're now responsible for posting your volunteer recruitment, please let us know so that we can, thank you, Amber, I appreciate that. So yeah, let us know so that we can get you set up and get you connected. And so listed here, like I said, we have several of our volunteer bases. We have our schools and universities, of course. And so many of us always using our university students for our different events and things. They're one of our largest bases. And then we also have our faith-based organizations and our veteran organizations as our volunteers here. And then so also too, just to remind you all who are getting back to using volunteers, we do have, there is a mandate that 7th graders are required to do a service learning project for their social studies classes. And so with our different middle schools, it looks different. Some of the middle schools require the students to do a total of 5 hours per 9 weeks. So that's a grand total of 20 hours for the year. And they can do them in different places or the same places. And so if you're looking to help a youngster find out more about your organization, you may look into that as a volunteer opportunity for someone. And so when you're thinking about recruiting, you want to think about the channels that you're using, what you need in your volunteers. Like I said, are you looking for are you searching for that cattle call where you just need warm bodies to come out for an event and help set up and that type of thing? Or are you looking for a more skilled volunteer where you need to target recruit? And so we can do both of those things on our Get Connected and help you out. But of course, then there are the other avenues as far as your Facebook and oh goodness, I can't think now. The social media avenues. And then of course the newspaper and radio also. Next slide, please. And so when we think about volunteer motivation, we know that volunteers volunteer for several different reasons. They volunteer because they care about your cause and they want to give back. They may volunteer because they want to gain experience, like our interns and students. They may be required to do volunteer service, like those court-ordered, or like I just talked about, those 7th graders who are required to do some volunteer service. And they're asked, by their friend or neighbor or spouse, I'm going over here to volunteer, why don't you come with? And so when we are thinking about why people are coming to our organization to volunteer, we want to build relationships. And so it take the time to discover what their motivation is and help cultivate that when they're with our organization. Specifically, when we're talking about our elderly population or retired who are looking for volunteer opportunities to get out of the house. They're just tired of sitting in the house and they want to get out for some socialization. Here at Volunteer Leon, those are typically the ladies that we've had in our office working with us. They come in, we have a little social time and they get right to work. And I can tell you, sometimes it doesn't take long for them to get the work done. I remember back maybe 2017, 2015, I can't remember exactly what year that was, but I had a volunteer who came in and we were trying to get our documents scanned because we were trying to get rid of a lot of the paperwork that we had. And we wanted to get the volunteer profile scanned in and cataloged. And she came in and in 2 months, she had it done. I'm talking done. And she, and it was great that it happened that way too, because she was actually going to be a first-time grandmother. And so her grandbaby came and she was like, okay, guys, see y'all later, bye. I got to go take care of this grandbaby, which was wonderful, but the work was done. She came in, she got it done, she moved on. And so sometimes you get a volunteer who, and I know it's so funny because we think about those great volunteers who can come in and get the work done, and sometimes it may take another volunteer 20, 30 years to get the work, that same amount of work done. But it was something that we wanted done. We didn't need it done that fast, but it was great that it was, because then it helped move on to something else for the next volunteer who came in to assist to help us. And so those are the types of things when you're looking at volunteers, their motivations change. Yes, she was ready to get out of the house and everything, but when that grandbaby came, she had to say bye-bye, Volunteer Leon. And we understood that. And so that happens too. And so you want to be flexible and allow your volunteers and when you recruit them, but realize that they have lives and things change, and you may have to do some maneuvering and re-recruiting for that position if needed. Did you have anything, Royal? Okay, next slide, please. So volunteer training. So it is, as these headlines show, it's super important to make sure that we orient and train our volunteers, because like I previously stated, they're representing an organization and they need to understand what they should and should not do, where they can and cannot operate, how they should and should not operate, why they should or should not, and who they can and cannot provide service to or interact with on behalf of the organization. And so this brings to mind a funny story for Volunteer Leon. I'm just going to put our business in the street, Royal. And so we were lucky enough to assist DOH with setting up their clinics, their vaccination clinics. And we had volunteers to make phone calls. And so these volunteers were kind enough to use their own cell phones. And some of them did use the *69, I believe, to block their number, but they made these phone calls to set up the appointments to assist DOH with this. And we, not thinking far enough ahead, did not encompass in our training of our volunteers the fact that they may be contacted by the news media. And again, that was on our part because this was a hot topic. We were so excited to be helping to get volunteers out to be doing something that we just left that. And so some of the volunteers were contacted by news media and were giving information that they really shouldn't have been giving, that they were privy to because of being a volunteer. As far as like, and I really don't remember what exactly it was, but at that time, then we had to go back and say, yay, hey, okay, so if you are contacted, you need to send them to this person for information. You are not allowed to, please do not give out any information. That's not your job. Your only job in this position is to call and make appointments. That's all you're allowed to do as a volunteer under this. So yeah, so we had to go back and make some, do a little retraining and straighten that out. But these are the types of things that, and part of that was that we got that position so quickly. It was such a quick turnaround that we really didn't, if that was one of our positions that we always have, we would have had everything set up for it. But we literally got that opportunity that I think it was like that Thursday or Friday, and we started. Is that right, Royal? Do you recall?
So yeah, it happened very, very quickly at a time when the vaccine was really, really coming available very early. And it was a super rush to get shots in arms of people, specifically our elderly populations at the time. And so we stepped in and leveraged the volunteers we had, a lot like Kay said, who were home wanting to do things, but were unable to. And this was their first time to really feel like they were helping. And so A lot of times we know when all volunteering, a lot of times is hard work. So we did have a lot of people who were just, excited and happy to be serving in that capacity. And there was this huge, I guess, community circle for information. So media wanting to tell those stories. And sometimes, because it was all happening, global pandemic never had happened before. Things were going so fast, and some of those volunteers, again, just in their excitement, started, having people from the media reach out to them because they were posting on social media how, happy and excited they were. And you want your volunteers to be proud. But given the ramifications of this particular incident related to COVID, we had to kind of reel them back in a little bit. And once we did that, everybody was fine, because we just didn't want them to be miscommunicating stuff, because they were only getting a small piece of the larger pie.
Yeah. And again, just like Ross said, the volunteers, they were happy to do it, and they understood after it was explained to them too, and so, yeah, it was just one of those things that it happens, and it happens to those of us who have been doing volunteer management for years. And so I just wanted to let you know that it can happen to you too. But just wanted to go back to making sure that your volunteers understand that they are, again, representing the organization in their position, and that they, if there are consequences, will suffer those consequences for lapse of judgment, poor judgment, that type of thing, as we see in the headlines here for these two unfortunate civil servants. And so we just want to be mindful when we're doing our orienting and training of our volunteers, that we're addressing those risks. As we talked about earlier, each volunteer position may have a level of risk if they're dealing with direct clientele, or and so we want to make sure that we are discussing that information during each level. We're discussing it during our recruiting. We're discussing it during motivating that volunteer. We're discussing it during the training. And so we're discussing those risks because we want to make sure that our volunteers understand. Are there any questions? I keep forgetting to ask if there are any questions. I don't know if we are holding them to the end, but please, if there are any questions, LaShawn, just let us know. All right, next slide, please. And so listed here, we have some habits of effective supervisors. And we're looking at these things from the premises of Reinventing Government, which was published several years ago. But when you're thinking about evaluating your program, what gets measured gets done. And so you're thinking about, if you're trying to see what volunteers think about your organization, think about the position that they're doing with your organization, you have to ask. I know we do surveys. I know annually here at the county, we do our annual evaluations. There has to be some type of tool in order for you to get that information. And so the next one, if you don't measure results, you can't tell success. I'm on the wrong one. Wait, oh, we skipped one. No, we got to go back. We're supposed to be on supervising. I'm sorry. Well, like, wait a minute. Uh-oh. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I was like, wait a minute. Sorry about that. Yeah, effective supervisors. And so we're listing here that effective supervisors spot and address shortfalls before they grow into real problems. You want to take care of the person, not the task. If you take care of the person, they'll take care of the task. You want to provide guidance. in a way that works for the volunteer. And this may not all the time be the way that you're comfortable, because, you know, there's been going around and we talk about the love languages and the volunteer languages and how you communicate with your volunteer. And so that also goes for when you're providing guidance to them. How are they best going to accept what you're telling them and can understand? And I forgot to mention, in training, you definitely want to provide several different types of training, because a lot of different people learn differently. So yeah, you want to provide visual, you want to provide auditory, you want to provide worksheets and forms that they can write on to help them remember things. So definitely different types of ways. And so again, that also is going into supervising. You want to be versed on different supervisory techniques so that you can address and support your volunteers the way that they are comfortable. You want to support, not control. Efforts to control stifles enthusiasm. You want to let your volunteers know that you're willing to listen and hear their point of view and their thoughts and their concerns. And especially when they come to you about concerns and things that have happened to them in the organization or through the organization or through working in their position, because those things may need to be tweaked, addressed. And now, of course, that's not to say that the volunteer themselves may have an issue that needs to be addressed, but that's why you need to listen to what's going on with them when they come to you. And you want to provide that space. So, and I know we're all busy. And like I said, I said when our ladies would come in, we would try to meet at least once a month. So they had different schedules, but we try to meet at least once a month so that they could express what was going on, what they were finding, what things, and especially when we moved to a new system. It wasn't really a new system, but I instituted using the Smart Sheet for some tracking of our data. And we had one volunteer who had been here a while, and she felt that it was redundant because the information we were capturing in the Smart Sheet was already being captured in another software. And so I had to explain to her that, yes, that is true. But because it's not as easy to manipulate the data from the software, the use of the Smart Sheet, and it was better than using Excel, because then we all had access to that data at any moment. We could click on it, we could see what was going on with that volunteer and things of this nature. And so it just took some time. And again, we understand that a lot of people have difficulty with change. And so when you're instituting something new, you do have to sit down and listen to people's concerns and address them. All right. And so supervising volunteers is about providing direction and resources, not directing or bossing. And again, that goes to, like I said, listening to concerns. Definitely, sometimes when we have our volunteers in our citizen information line, it's fast paced. We're doing things fast, and they know, okay, Kay does not mean any harm. She's just trying to get this work done. Okay. And that's a different situation from when we're sitting down in the office. It's blue skies, as they say, it's blue skies. And we've got time to talk about these different things. And then again, they know they can come to Kay and say, listen, you know, this didn't work well, or we need to retract this or whatever. And so you want to be open. And if you have that open door policy, as they say, during blue skies, when there is something that needs to be done, that work that needs to be gotten out quickly, when you're moving fast, when you have a training coming up and you're trying to get everything ready and all hands on deck, so to speak, then your volunteers are more apt to understand, okay, yeah, we're about the business of getting this done right here, and it's not not the way we normally operate, so to speak. All right. Yeah, next slide. Okay, now on to evaluating. And so these are the tips for evaluating your volunteer program. And we talked about this, the best way to utilize your volunteers. You want to learn the things that work best for your program through assessments of staff and volunteers. And it's just, as you can see, it all connects together. You want to make sure from beginning to end that you're involving your staff and your volunteers in all of the process. You want to make the necessary changes to stay strong and effective and grow your volunteer base. Uh-oh, wait. Oh, okay. We're going to be on this slide for a while. Okay. And so we, as I was stating earlier, when what gets done, if you're not measuring it, how do you know if it's getting done? And then if you don't measure results, you can't tell success from failure. And if you can't see success, you can't reward it. And if you can't reward success, you are probably rewarding failure. And so with our volunteer programs, and like we all know, we all get busy. And this particular time last year was a very good time to reevaluate our programs and what we were doing and how we were doing it and what was effective and what wasn't. And so I know a lot of organizations have now, as well as we have in our libraries, we had a little bit of the virtual program, a few virtual programs going on with the tutoring and whatnot, but we have expanded that. And a lot of this virtual programming that has been developed is going to be around because it has been successful for people. And so we know that several organizations have done this in looking at ways to be more effective during the pandemic. They found out that, oh, wow, we can use this even after the pandemic is over. And this is going to, and I know like particularly with our library's homework helper program, before the volunteer and the tutee would have to set up a place to meet, pardon me, and go there. Typically it was the library, but that caused for the parent of the tutee to have to make arrangements, as well as the volunteer to make arrangements to get to the library. And for that hour and a half or whatnot, that parent would be sitting around waiting for their student to be tutored and then either leave or come back and pick them up. Well, now it's just the click of a button. The student and the volunteer sign on to the homework hub, then they are put into a room and they commence with their what they're doing. And then when it's time to the end of their session, they click out and there you go. And our homework hub staff tracks the hours for the volunteers. And it has been working very well. And so we're going to definitely keep that going. And so I think that with the advent and use of all of this technology that we were using during the pandemic, a lot of organizations are going to find that this is going to be a great way to incorporate maybe some hybrid positions also, where some folks can have some positions where a volunteer will maybe either work part of the time in the office and then sometime virtually, or even a totally virtual position And we in our office have not created that, just because of, like I said, our volunteers typically that we have been using, they have been wanting to get out of the house, and that was the whole purpose, and for them coming in and doing things here. So, but that doesn't mean that we're not looking at that, and that may not, that isn't something that we're looking at. We are looking at ways to advance. How much time do I have? Oh, good, I'm doing it good for time. And using those opportunities, those resources as well. And so as you're looking at your volunteer programs, you want to think about all of these things. And like I said, hopefully in the spring, we will be offering another volunteer management series session, and that you can sign up. Now, in the past, those, oh, okay. We've offered that in January, but typically it's in the spring. We've offered it in January or February, March. So be looking out for those advertisements. And so with that, that's going to end my portion, and I'm going to throw it to Royal for the rest. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Kay, and try to get you all out of here within this hour. So I might talk faster than I should, but I want to leave some time for questions also. So also a big part of this engaging volunteers is also how we engage the community through our organizations and also as individuals. And all that really is forming a lifelong relationship centered in community. And we're able to do this through 5 really basic tools. Increase the citizens' knowledge about a community and or issue you are seeking to address. And these are things that we can all do through the nonprofits that you're representing or just as individual citizens. Encourage citizens to co-create additional knowledge and understanding and applying that knowledge. So, I mean, that's really important because not only to seek the knowledge, but really get a different, a broader understanding of that knowledge. But then the big part of all of that is to then put it into action. Use that knowledge to improve the community or address the identified problem. So again, we don't want to ever, if we're going to ever address something in our community, recognize a problem and do nothing. People all day sit around at home and point out problems. The organizations that you're representing and the work you do are those people who identify them, but then also find ways to improve them. Create future opportunities for citizens to engage each other. So even through your organizations, you have a specific scope that you work in. And I challenge you to do something within that scope that took you outside of what you always do to have a broader impact, but then to also engage citizens who always don't get an opportunity to work with you in your organization. Ensure that these opportunities and effective communications become a regular and ongoing component of the process. So again, once you do one thing, it's important to not just sit on that. One of the big things is, and not saying change your focus area, but in order to truly have an impact on the citizens you work with and you serve, we've got to always be thinking broader than just what we do and finding other people who bring additional resources into what we do. So this question for today will just be rhetorical, but how do we change the world? And just to give you 5 seconds to think about that, a quick 5, how do we change the world? Well, I'll kind of give you a quick answer by starting with ourselves. Change is a fundamental part of growth, and effective change must come from within individuals and groups. So again, no organization or individual is perfect, right? But we all strive for that and try to be the best we can be to provide those services we do to those organizations and individuals we work with. But sometimes it requires us to step out of our own comfort zones because there's more than one approach to positive engagement in the community, and then also in working with people that are going to work with the people you serve. Community engagement and growth starts by first changing ourselves, our attitudes, language, and the way we view the world around us. I mean, so this is extremely important because we all develop how we see things by our experiences. And I would challenge you and your organization to step out of just what you do, and look at some other organizations and entities to work with, because it'll allow you to see the world in a different way, which will ultimately help you improve the services you provide. Not that they're bad or anything, but it's always better to understand several perspectives if our true goal is to change people's lives, change our community, which ultimately changes the world. Communities are most successful when true partnership exists. So on this call today, we've got several different people representing several different organizations. I would challenge everyone post this meeting to figure out, I know Amber and LaShawn can send it out, who was on here, and just introduce yourself, invite them for coffee, and just talk about what your organization does, and then find out what theirs does. And there might be opportunity there for your organizations to start to collaborate in partnership. And there's superpower in that, right? Partnerships exist, and power or control is delegated and vested effectively within the community when we work together. A lot of us in our own areas are solving the same problems, but just in a specific area, right? So partnership is always a gateway to success for our community. So I'll stop there because I could keep going and going, but you'll see here Kay and myself's contact information, and we are here for you. If your organization is in need of some support, or you're trying to figure out where to start to find those volunteers, we would love to help you in doing that. And then also kind of helping you, kind of like what Amber and LaShawn do with UPHS, and connecting you to the other organizations that are in UPHS to start those partnerships. So I'll stop there and we can take some questions if there are any.
So thank you very, very much, Kay and Royal. Lots of information. If we have any questions, feel free to ask them. But I really wanted to, I know I've spoke with a lot of you all about building out your volunteer program, a lot of you all wanting interns. And so please reach out to Miss Kay or either Royal, and they'll be happy to sit with you and have a conversation, talk about what that looks like. We sent out the Volunteer Leon volunteer application to our UPHS members last year, but we'll be happy to resend that out because volunteers do provide a lot of support. And just kind of looking at a lot of the entities on the call today, you need that volunteer support. And as Ms. Kay mentioned earlier, you'll find out that they're very, very efficient. And a lot of times, a lot of the stuff you're banging your head against the desk saying, how can I figure it out? Volunteers are the answer. So I see Uncle Jack mentioned something in the comment. So he says, he put some information in there about the Children's Service Council as well as his contact information. Thank you, Sheena. We appreciate you. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, as always, the recording will be available as soon as it's ready. We will get that sent out to you all. Thank you all very much. Everybody saying lots of good information. We will get that sent out to you all, and Ms. Kay will make sure that we have the updated application, and we'll send that out to you all as well. And we appreciate you for your time today. It is a wet day in Tally, so please stay safe, and we will see you soon. Bye, everybody.